Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I posted the notes as well as the video on the group. I hope it will be useful. We have again Gunjit with us, and whatever queries some of the members had, that was posted on the group. I believe some of the were quite late, but Gunjit will try to address all of these. Take another webinar next Thursday or Friday, same time.
Perfect.
And we can have the next topics could be a change in the new return forms as to what additional information we have to get given any return form. So we can select a member amongst us who speak. I'll have a word with all of you personally, whosoever is ready to deliver the speech. Vaseem has also joined. Hello, Vaseem.
Hello. Ready?
We are just 8 at the moment, and I think let us wait for another 2-3 minutes so that a few more people can join.
Sure. How many more are expected?
You'll be able to pick up the next topic of change in the return forms for the coming Thursday or Friday, whatever is convenient.
Friday or Thursday? Yes.
Yes.
We can have it.
What day will suit you?
Any day, Thursday or Friday.
So let it be a Thursday, and the topic would be the changes in the new return forms.
Okay, we'll have that. So now, what's the agenda now?
Today's discussion will be just primarily comparing 1023C and section 11 and 12. So which one do we choose now? And then the queries.
Most of the queries are there already on the group. I hope you have gone through those, and then you are prepared for the.
Done.
गिलानी साहब की हाल है?
बहुत फर्स्ट क्लास सुनाओ।
बड़े दिनों बाद दर्शन हो रहे हैं।
मौसम बहुत अच्छा है, मौसम बहुत अच्छा है।
हाँ, मौसम नहीं हुआ अच्छा। Just now.
Discussion में यदि हो रही है बहुत।
Should we start
All
now?
is well. हाँ, sure.
Certainly, sir.
We start?
Gunjit, I think we should start. Go ahead.
सत श्री अकाल जी।
सत श्री अकाल, की हाल चाल?
बस सर बढ़िया, आनंद मंगल। मैं क्या हेल्दी डिस्कशन शुरू हो गई है, बड़ा अच्छा है जी ये एनवायरनमेंट।
हाँ, चाहिए।
So should we start then?
Go ahead.
Okay, so primarily let us see now, as per Finance Act 2020, we have to see that which of the two exemptions, whether 1023C is better or section 11 exemption is better. So we must keep in mind that first and foremost that section 1023C can only be availed by, sorry, I'm just stopping in the middle. 1023C, I will be talking only with respect to the approved institutions. Approved institutions are the big institutions whose receipts are more than 1 crore. Or 1023C 4 and 5. But till now, at least I have not personally come across any institution which is registered under section 1023C 4 or 5. So I'm going to be talking primarily regarding 1023C 6 and 6A, which are the big schools and the big charitable hospitals having receipts of more than 1 crore. and comparing them vis-a-vis section 11. So first and foremost, the difference is that section 115 TD, which is the exit tax, that is applicable only in respect of institutions which are registered under section 12AA and now which will become 12AB. Exit tax of 115 TD is not applicable in case of institutions covered under section 1023C. So that is the first difference. Now the second difference is the interpretation. Section 11 read with section 215 gives a wide interpretation of the institutions or the institutions which are covered under charitable purpose clause, whereas 1023C 6 and 6A will only get limited to either the medical relief or the educational aspect. So again out here, the institutions which are under 1023C have a very narrow and a restrictive applicability. Now talking regarding retrospective applicability of the section, like I had mentioned yesterday.
Gunjit, just a moment. Since you have the rights, कुछ लोग waiting room में हैं, उनको आप admit कर लो.
Should I start again then?
Continue. I think यहीं से आप कर, जिनको आपने admit कर दिया ना, auto पे कर दो आप उसको बेशक. So everyone can join.
Auto कौन से करते हैं? At least that I don't know.
चलो अभी आपने जो admit कर लिया है ना?
Yes.
बस ठीक है.
वो फर्स्ट पॉइंट को रिपीट कर दो यार. That is an important point.
हाँ, hurriedly कर दो.
Just revise the that 115 TD is the most important point.
Good evening, everyone. So today's topic of discussion is going to be the exemption under section 1023C vis-a-vis section 11. So the institutions which are covered under 1023C are quite a lot, but in this discussion we will only restrict ourselves to the institutions covered under subclause 6 and 6A, which are basically the medical institutions as well as the educational institutions. Now the first and foremost.
Gunjit, just sorry to interrupt you again. I think Mr. Arora is trying to connect. उनका एक बार देखो, if you can admit him. IS Arora.
There is pending. There is no pending admission, uncle.
और अगर can you
just log in, log out and log in again?
लॉग इन नेक्स्ट में होना है. जब दिक्कत देगा, I think you can continue now.
Okay. So
मीटिंग को फिर दोबारा शेड्यूल करना पड़ेगा.
Carry on.
हाँ, please.
So the first and foremost the difference is that section 115 TD, which is the exit tax, is not applicable in the cases which are approved under section 1023C, whereas the charitable organizations which are registered under section 12A or now 12AB, on once they fall in any of the four categories mentioned in section 115 TD, then section 115 TD will be applicable. So out here the advantage goes to the institutions which are approved in 1023C because there is no exit tax, and exit tax, like I had explained yesterday, is very fatal to the survival of the educational institution because there is tax at MMR on the fair market value of the assets, and the assets value as of today will be extremely high. The next difference between the two sections are that 1023C is a narrow and a restrictive. That 1023C is a narrow and a restrictive section, whereas section 11 read with section 12AA and now 12AB is a general and a wider section in order to claim exemption. Because in 1023C, I will have to restrict myself to only the medical relief or the educational income in respect of the institutions covered under section 1023C 6 and 6A. Now
कुंजी
next is
सबको म्यूट कर दो आप.
AP सिंह बैठा है.
shall I carry on?
कुंजी सबको म्यूट कर दो आप.
अच्छा.
म्यूट कर दो सबको so that वो डिस्टरबेंसेस खत्म हो जाएंगे.
The next difference between the two is the retrospective applicability of these sections. Now, as I had explained yesterday, that section, no doubt the approval under section 12 and 12A is prospective in nature, but due to the second proviso to section 12A, the exemption under section 11 and 12 can be claimed retrospectively also if there is any assessment proceedings pending on the date of such registration. So in case of 12A, suppose there is, again I'll take the example which I had taken yesterday, there is an unregistered trust as of today, it receives notice under section 147. If it goes and applies for section 12AB registration as of today, then, and it gets the registration under section 12AB in the coming future, then this trust can take advantage of section 11 and 12 in the preceding years also. So the second proviso to section 12A2, which is a clincher out here, gives advantage in section 12A to the institutions which will go in for 12AB, but there is no proviso. There is no proviso in section 1023C, which is similar to section 12A. So 1023C will be applicable prospectively, whereas because of the second proviso to section 12A2, we can take exemption under section 11 and 12 retrospectively also. So this is the next difference. Now the next difference is regarding the filing of return. So return in respect of 1023C, the institutions has to be filed as per section 139(4)(c). And in respect of the 12A institutions, that has to be filed under section 139(4)(a). Now we have to keep in mind that in section 12A, subsection 1 and subclause BA, that makes the filing of return before the due date mandatory to claim exemption under section 11 and 12. Now, the thing is that there is no similar proviso, because this is a question raised by Bhasin Saab also, that there is no similar proviso to proviso in section 1023C. So the interpretation I take is that if my return, which is under 1023C, which I'm filing under section 139(4)(c), even if it is late, it is a belated return, I can still claim exemption under section 1023C. For this, in fact, I just before the webinar, this is the memorandum explaining finance bill, because 12A1BA was brought in by Finance Act 2017 with effect from assessment year 18-19, which made the return filing for the 12A institutions before the due date mandatory. So I will just read the memorandum explaining the finance bill, and Finance Act 2017 has not made any similar amendment in section 1023C. As of today also in section 1023C, there is no similar provision which says that the return has to be filed within the due date. So I will just read the applicable part, which is further, as per the existing provisions of the said section, the entities registered under section 12AA are required to file return of income under subsection 4A of section 139. If the total income without giving effect to the provisions of section 11 and 12 exceed the maximum amount which is not chargeable to income tax. However, there is no clarity as to whether the said return of income is to be filed within time allowed under section 139 of the Act or otherwise. In order to provide clarity in this regard, it is proposed to further amend section 12A so as to provide for further condition that the person in receipt of income chargeable to income tax shall furnish the return of income within the time allowed under section 139 of the Act. These amendments are clarificatory in nature. So section 12A1BA is applicable for the institutions claiming exemption under section 11 and 12, and there is no similar provision in section 1023C. So if section 1023C return is filed belatedly, exemption will not be denied, number one. But in both the cases, I'm repeating again, that penalty under section 272A of 200 rupees per day will be applicable. That penalty the institution will have to pay. So now the next difference between the two sections is the availability of the exercising of option of deemed application. Under, as I had mentioned yesterday, that explanation 1.2 to section 11.1 is available in case of institution registered under section 12A. But there is no similar provision in section 1023C wherein we can exercise any kind of deemed application. The next difference is accumulation under section 12.2. So as we know that for accumulation under section 11.2, we have to file form number 10, we have to mention the purpose, we have to mention the period, and the maximum period is 5 years. But there is third proviso to section 1023C, which allows me to accumulate income in section 1023C, but neither is there any form which is prescribed, neither do we have to mention the period, neither do we have to mention the purpose, neither is the period mentioned in the third proviso to section 1023C. So my interpretation is that income can be accumulated infinitely. The next difference between the two is if the institutions covered under both the sections are carrying out business activity. In case of the institutions covered under section 12A, then section 11.4 will be applicable, which gives the power to the AO to recompute the business. So he will recompute the business as per section 28 to 44C. And when he recomputes the business, there is excess of what is the excess or more than what has been declared in the return, then section 11 and 12 exemption will not be applicable. But so comparing that to section 1023C, again, there is no proviso in section 1023C which gives AO the power to recompute the business. So if I am a 1023C institution, I am carrying out any incidental activity, then in such a case, the AO does not have the power to recompute my business income. Then the next difference between the two is that section 12.2 is there, which will be applicable to 12AB institutions, which is basically the value of medical and educational services provided to persons specified will be income, and such will not be available for exemption under section 11.1 of the Act. So what is this is basically if a trust is running a school and a child of the trustee is running in the is studying in the school, in that case the value of the fees will become the income in the hands of the educational institution, and section 11 and 12 exemption will not be available in such a case. The next difference is regarding modifying the object clause. So if if I am registered under section 12AB, I go in for modification of my object clause. I have to, within 30 days, I have to apply for re-registration. And if I fail to get re-registration, then I will be subject to exit tax. Now, there is no such provision in section 1023C also. If I modify my objects, then there is no such provision for me to, first of all, get myself re-registered, and moreover, there is no exit tax also. Then the other difference is that provisions of section 13(1)(c). If we have a look at all the provisos to section 1023C, there is no proviso which mentions that if I do any kind of transaction with persons specified under section 13(1)(c), that they will be the disallowance or my registration will get cancelled or anything of that sort. There is nothing of that sort mentioned in section 1023C. Whereas there is section 13(1)(c), which is applicable to institutions covered under section 12AB, which is basically if there is a violation, it will lead to cancellation of my registration, and then exit tax of 115 TD will also be applicable on me. And last one is that the AO does not have power as per proviso to section 143(3). The AO cannot deny me exemption in case of I am claiming exemption under section 1023C. At best, what he can do is he can refer my case to the CIT for cancellation of my approval. And in such a case, even as per section 153, the time limit for completion of assessment also gets extended. Whereas in case of 12AB institutions, the AO can independently deny me exemption, and he has the power to do that during the assessment proceedings. So these are basically these are the major differences between the two sections. So my analysis is that if an institution is having purely educational activities or purely medical relief activities, it can go in for 1023C, because 1023C is going to give them certain advantages. Because if there is accumulation, then there is first of all, first and foremost is 115 TD is not applicable. 115 TD is not applicable in case of registered entities under section 1023C. So that is the most biggest factor. So, and accumulation and all these advantages which I have just explained right now. So 1023C vis-a-vis section 11, 1023C is more advantageous, provided that the institution is having only medical relief object or the educational object. Only those entities will be covered. I'll just unmute everyone. So these are basically the differences between both the sections. And now if we are ready, we can go in for question and answers also. Should I go for question and answers? Hello, Sandeep Uncle, should we go for question and answers?
I think, Gunjit, you should invite for the question answers.
Okay, done, Uncle. So the first question is by AP Singh Ji, and his query is that if a charitable trust having objects of general public utility receives certain amounts from YouTube on account of his videos or courses liked by public, then what is the nature of receipt and taxability? My answer to this is that I will just come back to my note. So the basic question of AP Singh Ji is whether the proviso to section 215 will be applicable in this case. If I am for the advancement of general public utility and I want to claim it as charitable, first and foremost, I should be doing a business. The business should be incidental to my incidental to advancement of object or general public utility, and my business receipts do not exceed 20% of the total receipts. So first and foremost, it will have to be seen whether this activity of receiving money from YouTube on account of my videos being there on YouTube, I receive any money, whether that is business. So like I had mentioned yesterday, we will have to see the definition of business. Now, what is business? That is given in section 213. Business includes any trade, commerce or manufacture or adventure in the nature of trade, commerce or manufacture. So my interpretation is that receiving money because of videos being there on YouTube and being liked by lot many of the public, it is not business, because it is neither trade, commerce or manufacture nor any adventure in the nature of trade, commerce or manufacture. So my interpretation is that it will not come in the definition of section 215, and therefore proviso will not be applicable. And once proviso, even if it is applicable, then we'll have to see whether the business receipts are within 20% of the total receipts or not. So that is also another thing. But my interpretation is that it will not fall in the definition of section 213 only itself, first and foremost. The second query is by IS Arora Ji, is regarding, is there any change in respect of 1023C 3AD institutions, which are basically small institutions, small educational institutions, and which are having total receipts of less than 1 crore. So, Arora sir, there is no amendment regarding the institutions which are covered under section 1023C3AD. They do not have to go for registration. Only filing of return is compulsory. That is, my interpretation is that return can be filed belatedly also. So, next query is of Narinder Vig ji is regarding if there is an unregistered trust. How I have Sandeep uncle, I'm getting query from Anand Saab that he's unable to join, but there is nothing pending on my end.
All right, let him join in the question and answer series.
Uncle, there is no pendency from my side actually.
Yes, there is no pendency. You go ahead with the question of Mr. NKV.
So Vig Saab's the query is for trust etc. If not registered under the Act, ITR 7 is not being validated. If we file ITR V, tax is calculated by the system at MMR. Very right, Vig Saab. What you need to do is in ITR 5, you need to choose the status as AOP BOI. I repeat, in status, you need to choose AOP BOI. And in sub-status, you need to choose trust other than eligible to file ITR 7. In that case, what will happen? The ITR form will not auto-calculate your tax, and out there you can put your you can physically put your tax as per the slab rate. So again, I repeat: status of AOP BOI, sub-status of trust other than eligible to file ITR 7. And the next query was of Basin Saab, whether in respect of institutions under section 1023C6 and 6, if they file the return belatedly. So my the understanding of the thing of the subject is that because there is 12A1 subclause BA in section 12A, which makes it mandatory for institutions under section 12AA to file their returns within time, but there is no such proviso in section 1023C. So these trusts which are covered under section 1023C, they can file their returns belatedly. The next query was of Rajiv Bansal Saab. Where he asked that whether unspent corporate donation will be taxed in the 6th year. So corporate donation doesn't come in the calculation of 85%. So his query was regarding unspent corpus donation, whether it will be taxed in the 6th year. So corpus donation is basically not income only as per section 11(1)(d), which does not have to be spent. So it will not be liable for any tax in the 6th year. So any more queries?
Gunjit, I want to share one thing.
Hanji.
Hello.
Yes,
Are
yes.
you listening?
Yes, uncle.
I just want to share one thing. In the case, the question which I have put up with regard to educational institutions, because I feel and I find that if I go through the proviso, although it doesn't say directly so, but it has a hurdle. If I look at 10th proviso to section 1023C, have you got it?
Yes.
I don't have the latest update with me, but I do have the
10th proviso
manual. I am reading from 2018 DTM. I don't have the latest one with me right at now home. So 10th proviso basically is that we have to file an audit report.
Yes,
audit report is required. Whatever institutions under 1023C, they are required to file audit report. 10th proviso. That if I can read out that proviso for the information of everybody else also, provided also that where the total income of the fund or trust or institution or any university or educational institution or any hospital or medical institution referred to in clause 4, subclass 5, 6, 6A without giving effect to the provisions of the site exceeds the maximum amount which is not chargeable to tax in any previous year, such trust or institution or any university or other education institution or any hospital or medical institution shall get its accounts audited in respect of that year by an accountant as defined in section 288(2) and furnish along with the return of income Now here the point is that the audit report is to be furnished along with the return of income. For the relevant assessment year, the report of such audit in the prescribed form duly signed and verified by such accountant and setting forth such particulars as may be prescribed. Now, when we have to file this audit report along with the return, then there is a rule 16CC and form number 10BB. 10BB is the audit report form.
Yes.
And rule 16CC. Then there is rule 12(2). That audit report is to be furnished electronically. Now, if we collectively read all these rules also and this proviso, filing of audit report along with the return of income, then here it makes it mandatory to file the audit report with return in time as per section 139(1). Here I am stuck up, because although in the express terms which you have read out as per section 12AB, of course it is not so mentioned here. I have yet, I'm not having the latest update in the amended provision, whether there is any further amendment in this or not. But as per the rules, and these have come into effect from 1/4/2016. Earlier, we used to file the audit report even at the stage of appeal. That was taken as acceptable. But now it has become mandatory that the report has to be uploaded through the electronic media, and that has to be uploaded along with the return. And therefore, the return has to be filed within 139(1) period. And if it is beyond that, neither the audit report is acceptable, because these provisos, all these provisos, if I start reading section 10 from the start itself, it says that you are entitled not to include this income under section 10, whatever subsections are there. If it is 23C, then further as per the proviso. If any of the proviso is not complied with, I'm not entitled to have the exemption.
Absolutely.
So that is the point, that whether we can really say so that a belated return will not be causing the damage I'm likely to have.
Uncle, my interpretation again in this regard is when I see...
I agree with you that if it becomes a matter of appeal or dispute further, then of course we can do so. But outrightly we cannot say that.
Yes. I mean, obviously filing return in time, Uncle, is obviously beneficial, because otherwise I will get attracted by the penalty of 200 rupees per day also.
No, I mean, in your write-up, you have given that belated return can be there. So I am afraid that somebody may not take the laxity of it and relax. Okay, we'll file it.
Okay.
So from that angle, I am very sure that if anybody files a return beyond the time under 139(1), because even if you go to 139(4)(c), it does not say so that you can file a return belatedly. So whether it is 139(4)(a) or 144(c), both these sections are saying that you have to file the return as per section 139(1). So it has to be taken, to be doubly sure by everybody filing the returns of these schools or these under 1023C, that it has to be filed in time and the audit report has to be uploaded electronically in time.
That I agree.
Any delay would lead to your disentitlement to whatever exemptions you are trying to claim. So this is my point of view, and I believe this needed clarification, and that's why I put a question mark on that. How far it is safe to assume that we can file a belated return under 1023C. So from that angle, if anybody else has anything to say, I would like to have any such view.
We can add one more thing to it, that it has to carry a minimum income which is in excess of the exemption limit. Because if there is a loss, or then you can still go with the same thing.
You can get a debatable issue. That is still, okay, that interpretation can be there. Of course, in case of a loss, we may not do so. But normally, unless if you are filing a belated return, then you make it a case of a loss.
Yeah, that is my point.
Then it can be so. And one thing more, Gunjit, one thing more which I find that in the case of this renewal of registration, or whatever procedure has been now brought on statute by the amended provisions, they do not cover the situation of the cases where the matter has been set aside by the tribunal or any higher court. How they are to be treated, whether they are to be taken as pending as regards all others, or that is to be taken in a separate way, because there can be a specific direction of the tribunal or the higher court to look into the case from that viewpoint, or if any matter has been taken to the tribunal on a particular issue for rejection of my earlier application, and that particular issue is not to be addressed in the set aside proceedings, how that situation will be covered in the amended provision? Is there any clarity?
Exactly, I am facing an issue like this only because in the month of March, around 23rd or 24th of March, we received an order wherein the 12A application was rejected. So now I don't know, should I go in for an appeal? I'm in the process of filing an appeal right now. But when my appeal, till the time my appeal will be taken up, the 1st October 20 will pass. So whether I should, now I'm at a T point, whether I should go in for appeal and actually fight it or just file a re-registration under section 12AB, because in that case, now I will get a provisional registration. Straight away, the CIT cannot ask me any questions. So straight away I will get. So there is one case like this also. So should I go in for re-registration, in the appeal, or go for provisional registration?
I think it is better to have provisional registration.
Exactly, he cannot ask me any question.
No, not only that, because the tribunal, normally if you go to the tribunal, the only funda of the tribunal is to go back.
Exactly.
They hardly say that we grant you registration.
Yes.
So if they will send you back, again you will be in the queue, standing again in the same queue for another couple of years. And in the meantime, you may not be even having the provisional, and that will be a problem in uploading the return. Now when a provisional number will at least help you to upload.
Exactly.
And so this apart, one more point which Sandeep was also sharing with me in the morning, how the rush of work will be taken care of, or it will be cope up by the CIT, because in any given reason there is likely to be a huge number of cases.
Absolutely.
If it is for re-registration, and even if they have to do nothing in that, and that is to be given within 3 months, I believe.
3 months, yes, sir. Yes, Uncle.
Within 3 months, the re-registration without any inquiry is also to be given within 3 months. Now the point is, supposing there are good number of cases, and like you said yesterday, that there are cases where we do not have even the numbers, we do not even have the clarity as to what type of activity is involved. Under such circumstances, if we apply for re-registration, and if with the load of work, within 3 months we do not get a provisional registration, or we do not get not the provisional, rather the re-registration number, then how to upload the return? Again, the problem will be whether we have to mention the same registration old number, or we'll be getting some new number, or this point I do not know. This is something of course this is something
there is clarification required on this point.
This is the departmental problem, of course, but it will ultimately affect the SSC, because within 3 months we do not get any response from the CIT. Then we will be caught with the same problem.
Then Uncle, I presume that we take the advantage of the Supreme Court decision in case of CIT versus Society for Promotion of Education, and that one. So that
the department has not accepted that decision even. They are disputing that even. That you're talking of the deemed registration.
Deemed registration.
The department never agrees to that. Even now they are not giving deemed registration to anybody, because they are having lots of cases pending for so long a period. That if we believe that in the normal time they are giving 6 months to the CIT, and they are not dealing with the cases for years together, then it is a deemed registration, but they are not giving any benefit of that deemed registration to anybody. That of course we have the Supreme Court case to argue the matter, but effectively that is not delivering the results.
So Uncle, I will like to seek your guidance. I would like to seek your guidance regarding what about the cases where the registration certificates are missing?
Missing,
or they are lost
in the past, lost. Then how are you claiming it in the earlier years, and whether there is any assessment done in respect of those? Accepting that
I have a case, Uncle. I have a case. So in this case, this was registered somewhere in the early 80s, and only once regular assessment has been done somewhere in the mid 90s. We only have one order. But in that order, it only says it's one line order. Income is assessed at nil. Doesn't say I'm registered under such and such section, or nothing regarding that. Only one line cryptic order that income is assessed at nil. So out there I'm getting, but I have all the receipts. I have the receipt.
How you're filing? How you're filing your returns till date? What is being mentioned there?
Out there only the date of registration is being mentioned. That's it.
No, but how they are accepting it? I think now if you file ITR 7 without the registration number, they have some objections on that.
Uncle, what people are doing is that they are putting the number as 0. I mean, this is something.
They will not accept it. They will be treating it you as a unregistered institution.
I believe you need to have a number at least of that earlier registration.
I have nothing regarding that, but I have all the receipts, I have all the correspondence. I have a separate 12-way file which was filed by Dadaji, and we have all the correspondence, and we have everything, the queries which were raised in the 12-way proceedings, everything. But the 12-way certificate is not there.
Then it means that you studied the whole year in a particular class, and ultimately you didn't get the result of that, whether you were through or you were failed. How is it that it will not do that? That evidence will simply say that you did go for the registration, but how will you come to know of it, whether it was given or not given? It may be a case of rejection. That's why it can be. Supposing I'm ITO, I'll say you are trying to hide something which is not in your favor.
You know, how do I learn? My question is, how do I come out of the situation now?
No. You will have to file, take it as unregistered. You don't have any evidence. I mean, simply.
Then I can go in for the new registration. I'll go for the provisional registration. Then again, he cannot ask me anything.
That is the best choice. Otherwise, you will be fighting a case with hardly anything to win.
Sure.
Mera khayal hai, Sandeep, I think for all these practical problems, we should approach the CIT exemptions at Chandigarh.
Naji, once we tell them these are the problems, they will become more particular.
हाँ, मेरा ख्याल है संदीप जी, ये जो प्रैक्टिकल प्रॉब्लम्स गुंजीत कह रहा है या फजीन साहब कह रहे हैं, इन डिटेल इसकी एक रिप्रेजेंटेशन जानी चाहिए to the CIT exemptions or even to the board also.
I think we should go to the board. To the board.
To the board, because CIT exemptions are otherwise they are tools of the board. They do nothing without the guidance of the board.
बस फिर बोर्ड को एक भेज दो, एटलीस्ट कम से कम रिकॉर्ड पे तो आ जाए. कल जवाब देने वाले कहीं पे बने, कई साहब ये जवाब ही नहीं देते हैं.
ऐसे नहीं कि whatever queries we have, सबके जो points हैं ना जी, वो ग्रुप में ही डाल दें. I will compile a letter and within 2 days we'll send it to the board.
I think
मेरा point यही था ना.
I think it is a good suggestion, and that all the members should give you the difficulties so that a combined application can be drafted and sent to the board.
बिल्कुल ठीक है अंकल.
I think you must thank this gentleman, Gunjit Syal. He has done a lot of work on this topic, although very dry and not so popular subject. But anyway, good effort by you, Gunjit.
Thank you.
Certainly, it deserves a big hand of applause.
Oh yes.
He has definitely taken a very donkey load, rather I'll say. In a very
the blessing of seniors are required. I'm thankful.
बाकी गुंजीत तेन पता ही है, भसीन साहब तो साडे encyclopedia है, और for his advice is also very valuable. And
yes, uncle, absolutely. We always learn from the seniors.
I have learned a lot from. One thing, Gunjit, I just want to know from your write-up. I have seen something. I just want to be more clear about that.
Uncle, can you be just a bit loud?
Kind. Contributions in kind.
Yes, uncle.
How you have mentioned somewhere that these are to be converted within 1 year or something.
Yes, uncle.
Have you seen?
Yes,
11.5, somewhere in 11.5 you have mentioned.
Yes, uncle.
That is actually mentioned,
uncle. Yes, I will come to that. That is mentioned in.
Please elaborate that.
Yes.
Sandeep, do we have time, or we are out of time?
40 minutes exceed kar gaye. We are continuing. I think we have another 40 minutes. We can continue, Basin.
I maintain it is abruptly blocked.
अच्छा, मेरे को बसीन एक और इशू था जो अभी आपने पॉइंट रेज किया है ना, donations in kind. Suppose somebody has given an air conditioner to a trust. No, am I still required to liquidate and get it to cash and then buy air conditioner for myself? Suppose I need air conditioner for my clinic and it's a hospital.
No. You see, it is not only one item. There are lots of issues on this nature of kind. I mean, in kind. Supposing only yesterday I was just creating a situation that if somebody comes and says, I'll give you a truck of cement, the other comes say, I'll give you Saria, I will give you this and all that building material, and you can raise a building. And the whole of the building is raised from the material which I'm getting, but not the money.
Yes.
How to account for that building?
You're right, because they probably could be anticipating if somebody gives gold, then should I go to the market and sell gold and convert it, that is fine. But if it is something
we don't need to convert it into cash, because supposing if I get ration, if it's a case of a mandir or a charity religious trust also, you get a lot of ration and other such material. We cannot sell it. We use it, consume it directly. We utilize it for the langar and other things.
Yes, Uncle.
I agree with you. I think we should be pointing out that things which are required in my operations, they should be excluded from this ambit.
No, I just wanted to have some clarification from Gunjeev. He has mentioned somewhere in his write-up.
Yes, Uncle. Uncle, just have a look at section 13.
At section?
Section 13. Basically 13(1)(d) and subclause 2A. 13(1)(d) subclause 2A.
Subclause 2A. And any asset not being an investment or deposit in any of the forms or modes specified where such asset is not held by trust or institution, otherwise ban in any of the forms or modes specified after expiry of 1 year from the end of the previous year in which such asset is acquired, or the 31st day of March 93, whichever is later. This is what it says. What does it mean?
So this is, Uncle, basically where any asset. Now this will cover the place where the money is there is donation in kind which is received. So I'll just read it. Any asset not being an investment or deposit in any of the forms or modes specified under section 11(5), where such asset is held by the trust or institution otherwise than by
no. Where such asset is not held.
Where is not held exactly.
Well, it is talking of things that if you have accumulated something, what I find is it talks of accumulation. 11(5). It talks of accumulation. If you have accumulated any of your assets and that has not been kept in the modes, 11 modes which are prescribed there. Then after the expiry of 1 year from the end of the previous year in which such asset is acquired, or the 31st day of March, whichever is later.
Whichever is later, exactly.
So how it starts, 13(1) says 11 not to apply in certain case. This point is that again the question is ki, if I have any asset which I am not accounting for anywhere, whatever in kind I receive, I don't account for it anywhere.
No, because the thing is, like you receive gold, bullion, anything. So you need basically, if you just keep that gold bullion like this, it can never be applied for charitable activity. So what it has to be done, it has to be converted and it has to be applied for charitable activities.
Some value has to be assigned to it and it has to be brought in the book.
Exactly.
It means the other way is that some value, that means ki in normal course, whatever voluntary contributions we received in kind. Well, it depends upon the nature of the activity. If supposing it's a school, or if somebody comes in the school and gives donation of furniture or books or any other item, that is not in the shape of cash or in the shape of a check. That means it will not come into my books of accounts or bank directly.
Exactly.
So it is in kind. Now it is on me whether to account for or should I dispose of outrightly without bringing in my books. 11(5) is talking of a situation where I am claiming it to be accumulated. I'm seeking. That means firstly I have to make it part of my record and then I have to.
Uncle, there are controversies on this point also. That section 11(2) will only come into operation when I have accumulation. Suppose if I don't have accumulation only, in the year I have spent more than 85% of my income, I don't have any accumulation. In that case, the section 11(2) will not come into operation. There is controversy regarding this also.
No. This is what I'm saying. That 11(2), well, practically, first we have to make 100 rupees. 100 rupees, then 85 has to be spent. If it is short of 85, then only the accumulation will, the whatever is the shortfall, that will go for accumulation.
Exactly.
So the question is, supposing I get 90 rupees in bank and 10 rupees I do not, I get something in kind for rupees 10. Then it makes out 100. That 10 rupees item is, supposing I say I have received furniture of rupees 10, but that is not in terms of money, and that is in terms of a kind. So I am assigning a value of that item, and then that 10 rupees becomes 100 rupees, the 100 rupees income. Out of that, supposing I have not applied 85 and I have applied 50 only, and 35 is left, and that furniture is there, then that means that furniture is to be converted into an asset of that investment which is required to be made in the specified book. And that is to be done within 1 year.
I will just differ a bit out here. I'll just differ a bit for the reason that where I get furniture I get, but furniture I will be using for my charitable activities. Suppose if I'm running a school.
Of course I'm using.
So in that case, I don't need to sell furniture.
No, I don't need to sell it. But even if I'm using it, firstly I have to put it. Supposing, let us say, if there is any other item which I'm not using, there can be items
like bullion, gold.
Bullion or gold or any such item which I may not be in a position to use, or it may not be relevant, or it may not be of use to the trust. It can be something which cannot be of use.
Plot of land is allowed as per 11.5. Immovable assets are allowed. I can receive donation of immovable asset, that is allowed as per 11.5.
The first point, which is to be, my viewpoint was that the first thing is that anything received in kind has to be accounted for in books.
Absolutely.
First of all, how to account for, how to assign a value to that to bring it in books, and then to see that it is utilized. And if it is shortfall, if it falls short of 85, then it is to go for accumulation. And in that situation, this 1D, 13(1)(d), which you have just read out, that will come into operation subsequently, because firstly it has to become part of my income.
Oh, absolutely.
It has to come into, then how to account for it in the books firstly, then to, if it is used, it's okay. If it is unused, then it is to be converted into those assets. That is within 1 year, that 13(1)(d) says. So what was the query of Sandeep? It was with regard to some AC.
Yes.
Hello, Sandeep.
If somebody's donated an article which is to be used, suppose it's a clinic and somebody donates an air conditioner, do I need to sell it first, convert it into cash, and then claim benefit? Otherwise, suppose if I have bought it, I record the value in the books of accounts. I will only record it.
No, if you get a bill of that. No, supposing if you're getting AC donated by somebody and you get a bill of that, then that means the value is itself given in the bill. We can account for the bill itself.
Absolutely.
So if that is, but that does not amount to conversion. So that has to be a clarity in second.
Exactly. So AC,
again, AC is used. If supposing the way Deep says that if furniture is used, that way AC is also used.
Exactly. So whatever is used for your activities, whatever is used for your charitable activities, that asset does not have to be converted. So you receive an AC, you receive a water filter, you receive furniture that will be used for your charitable activities. You don't need to convert it. Basically the concept behind this is that the assets which you receive, that should be used for charitable activities, or 85% of that should be spent. So if I receive,
but the subsection that you were reading, Gunjit, it says it should be other than investment and deposit. So if I am to use an asset in my day-to-day activities, it is still other than investment and deposit. It will still, I think we require some clarification on this issue so that that doesn't create any dispute in the future.
Okay.
Basically, what I find is that the entire chapter does not clarify how the contributions received in kind are to be accounted for and applied.
Yeah, that is there.
There is no clarity in the entire chapter. There is no such provision dealing directly with, because if you go to any institution, you will find lots of things lying in their premises which are donated in kind, other than cash, or lots of things. The way I just gave you an example, that people say that we will give you a truck of cement, we'll give you some construction material. Now, how to account for that? Supposing construction material has been given to me and I have not raised the building, that means it is not used. In that event, of course, the problem will come that I'll have to sell that truck of cement or bricks or whatever, and convert into money and then to put it into the FDR or into some other mode which is specified under 11.2 and 11.5. So there has to be some clarity as to how exactly such contributions received in kind are to be dealt.
Which we should, we will be writing something on this regard.
Yes, we should write, because this I have not seen anybody discussing even or raising this issue anywhere in so many writes up which we have studied so far. I have not seen anybody addressing this particular issue. Of course, I have myself been very confused over it. How to handle such things? Because so many things, because if suppose
what we are getting for consumption purposes, normally all trusts or institutions are writing the value by self-declaration on the receipt, and they quantify it and they book it in their accounts accordingly, whatever is being actually consumed or used. But as per I think, for other assets, one will have to take a direction.
Even for assets, Atul, that are being put to use, the section is not very, very clear. There is not, it is not excluding that.
That is there, but in case of an AC or something, a self-declaration by the person who's donating that it is worth 25,000 rupees and the receipt is issued in his name. So it quantifies it, and after that you can account for it in the books. This is what normal trusts or institutions are doing. I'm not saying how far legally, it has to be taken to, but this is...
Even if I am to put it in the books of accounts and claim depreciation because it's an fixed assets, if I am to make my accounts, what should be the value and what should be the basis of value? Let us say it is an old asset.
The value is normally being self-declared by the donor.
No, but the depreciation has to be on cost. So cost means there has to be some basis. It's an old asset. How do you arrive at a value? Suppose somebody is donated an old generator. Somebody is giving an old generator to you. How will you arrive at a value? You don't know the condition. You don't know the
donor for the value. And issuing a valid receipt for that. And we are rather claiming even 80G on the basis of those receipts.
No, but now with the new amendments, I think donations in kind will, we are on a different footing. Donations on kind are not
Sandeep, I suggest that we should address the board on this issue. They should make it more clear how the
good idea.
Goods received in kind or the contributions received in kind are to be dealt with in books.
I'll request all the to put their doubts on this issue on the group. I'll incorporate it in a letter and then we will send it as early as possible to the board.
Oh, yes, there should be, express provision in that so that nobody has to just keep on guessing or consulting somebody else to see kya karna hai. I do not know how it is qualified in the audit reports also, because audit report is so sketchy. Trust के audit report में तो कुछ भी नहीं होता है. But audit report, there's nothing in the audit report, I think. So I think from my side it's over. Let Gunjit also say the final goodbye if it is over.
I am done.
Anything else? So I'll request the members that the next week on Friday we are going to have our webinar on the amendments in the return forms and what additional information is to be submitted, and this will be taken up by Mr. Basid. So the time would be the same, around 7:30, and this time what we can have is, because certain people were having difficulty logging in, we can remove the
can we have a little early, Sandeep? Can we have it
7 o'clock should be fine. We'll circulate it in
because you know in the normal meetings we have been getting up by this time to have our snacks also.
So we will have it at 7 o'clock if that suits you. 7 o'clock
because there is no break in between. So if supposing it is extended beyond 45 and it is for another span of 45 minutes or 90 minutes, you have to stuck to your seat.
Right, agreed. So next week then we join again around 7 o'clock Friday.
Got it.
Thank you everyone. Thank you Gunji. Thank you all the members for a patient hearing.
Okay, good night everyone.
Good night.
Good night everyone.
Good night.
Okay.